What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. And in this video I thought I'd try something a little different. I'm going to do sort of a POV detailing video. I'm going to take you around to show you just how I do a regular kind of a routine wash on the MR2. And the cool thing is that you're going to be able to see it basically from my own perspective of what I see when I'm working away on this car. So let's go ahead and roll the intro and then get started from the very beginning. So the first thing I do whenever I'm going to be taking a hose to this car is I always cover up the engine bay, just because I no longer have the original rain guard in the engine lid. I've replaced it with these 10-inch fans, and so water will go straight into the engine bay, and so I want to protect the electronics as best as I can. Now the soap that I'm using is just Griot's Garage Car Wash, which is just a pH neutral soap. Nothing special there, but it's nice and slick. And today I was experimenting with an extra cap full of Optimum No Rinse in there as well, just to add some extra lubrication and also soften the water a little bit. The first thing that I do is I clean the wheels before I do any of the rest of the car. I just use regular, just over-the-counter soap for this. I don't worry too much about using fancy products for that. So when I'm cleaning wheels, I like to start from the inside out and from the top down. So I start with the inside of the wheelbarrow just because A, that's usually what gets the dirtiest on any car, and also I don't want to have the face of the wheel all nice and clean and then go and scrub and agitate all of the grime that's on the barrel of the wheel and have that all run out onto the nice clean wheel. So I kind of work from the inside, from the back there, and work my way forward, ending up with the front of the wheel. And so I've got a couple of different brushes that I use here, just whatever it takes to get into whatever nook and cranny I need to. And then I also use this it's just a regular wash mitt. And I do this just because I know a lot of people use brushes for the face of the wheels and stuff, but for me, I'd rather be touching it with my hand so that I know I can't always see where I've been and where I need to still go. But I know that if I've got this in my hand and I touch the entire wheel everywhere, I know that I've got the whole wheel clean. And it just seems faster for a lot of wheels, especially a 5-spoke wheel like this, to be able to just grab it and wipe it down with a mitt. And then I'll come around and do the outside lip towards the end. Again, just with the wash mitt, no big deal there. And while I still have the wash mitt in my hand, I'll actually reach in and do the inner fenders with it, just because I treat that the same as the wheel surface, because it's getting the same kind of contaminants on it. And then the last step when I'm cleaning a wheel is just I'll spray the tire down with, I believe this was Meguiar Super Degreaser, I think diluted 4:1 that I was using here, and I just scrub it with a basic tire brush. And then, this is a special case on this car, but I also wipe down all the exhaust soot that's around the exhaust pipe on this car, just because it runs really rich at times. And I don't want to contaminate my regular wash mitt that's going to be used across the rest of the car with that kind of stuff. Next up, I'm just going to give the whole car a nice pre-rinse. You'll see that I'm not using a pressure washer. I don't feel the need to. I mean, first of all, this is as dirty as this car ever gets. It's not like it's driven in the rain a bunch and driven down dirt roads and stuff like that. All I ever really have on this is a layer of dirt and usually some bugs in the front end if I've been on the highway for a while and heading out of town or something like that. But yeah, this car never really gets that dirty, and I really don't like the idea of using a pressure washer on a classic car that has old seals and everything on it. These cars, if you're familiar with MR2s, you know that it's very common for the seals on the T-tops to leak water. And those seals, if they do leak, they're very hard to find and replace. So the whole pressure washer and foam cannon thing, it's great for making videos. It's great for wowing your customers with the cool looking white car. Realistically, I mean, you can argue with me about this all you want, but it's not going to help with scratching that much. It's certainly not going to make any difference with how clean you get your vehicle. So I just use a garden hose, give it a light rinse down first, and go straight to the soap. I like to use a really soft lamb's wool wash mitt for this car because if you haven't watched my other videos, you're not familiar with this car. It has extremely soft, extremely thin paint on it to the point where I can no longer buff defects out of this paint safely without having a major fear of burning through. And so everything I'm doing here today is I've found that it's crucial to keep this car looking the way that it's looking and not introduce any more scratches than I need to. And so this is a wash mitt and not a pad. I've tested the Adams pad on this car as well, and it's just not as soft as this. I don't feel as comfortable. The only downside is that this is a mitt, and so I have to flip the collar of it, I guess you'd call it, inside out and make sure that it stays inside the mitt and not rubbing against the car and scratching the paint. And I'm also using the traditional 2-bucket wash on this. I'm not a fan of getting classic cars like this overly wet if I don't have to. And if this was any other car with a proper paint job on it, I would probably be doing a rinseless wash on it just because, again, with all of the seals and all the different places these cars like to hold water, it just is it's a better option for classic cars. But again, in this case, I have to take every precaution I can to avoid scratches. And while I think rinseless washes are completely safe, any time that I can avoid touching the car, especially touching it when it's not covered in soapy water, I've got to avoid that. So I'm doing a traditional 2-bucket method wash on this with a super soft wash mitt, and I probably cut out a bunch of times in editing, but every time I'll go back to the bucket and dip it in the rinse bucket and really scrub the mitt to try and get everything out of it. And I also wring it out away from the rinse bucket, so I'm not dropping anything else in there that I don't need to. And one other thing that you'll notice, I am using the least amount of pressure possible when washing this car. You can actually see the wash mitt is kind of falling out of my hands, and I'm just barely dragging it along the surface to avoid any kind of scratching. This is not something that you need to use any pressure on, especially on a delicate car like this. So the path that I like to take when I'm washing a car is I'll always start with the roof, and I'll wash the roof first and the windows in that area and work my way down. I'll do the hood and the engine lid. And then basically I'll start on the passenger front fender and spiral my way down the car, because of course it's important to start from the top and work your way down. On this car it's easier to notice because I've got the side molding all along each side, so the first pass I'll stay above that molding and I'll wrap my way around the entire car. And then when the time comes to do the dirtier parts, on this car specifically I did below the molding on the sides next because it really doesn't get that dirty. Again, it's not going down dirt roads, it's not covered in road grime or anything. And then the next dirtiest area would be the front bumper. And all I'm really going to see there is going to be a lot of bug splatters and stuff like that. I would consider that to be the second dirtiest part of the paint job. Just because that's the leading edge of the car. So anything you're driving through, that's going to collect the most of it. And then my final step is always going to be to do the lower rear end of the car, especially this car, because like I mentioned earlier, it shoots out a lot of exhaust soot onto the rear bumper. And also anything that's kicked up from the wheels and tires, because the wheel fitment on this car is so aggressive, it really flings things up onto the side of the rear bumper. And so I'll always save that for last, because I don't want to risk, even though I wiped all of the exhaust soot off first with a different mitt, I don't want to risk if there was any spot that I missed. I don't want to get that onto my clean wash mitt and then go and wash my hood or something like that and introduce all kinds of swirl marks and scratches. So it's kind of an organized process for me that I like to do every time. And another reason to do it this way is because then you don't have to worry about remembering what you've cleaned and what you haven't. If you do it the same time every time, then you don't have to worry. It's just kind of muscle memory. You just go through the motions and you get it all done without having to think about it too much. So then I'm just going to rinse the soap off of the car. I'm washing it in the garage here. You don't have to worry. The floor isn't drained, but it is sloped down towards the driveway, and the driveway is sloped downhill as well. So all the water runs out of this garage. It doesn't just sit there and pool. And I just prefer doing this because then I'm completely out of the sunshine. I don't have to worry about any soap drying on the paint or any water spots or anything like that. And so as you can see, as I rinse it off, you can see that the paint is still beating water really well, which means not only have we gotten it nice and clean, but that soap has been living up to its advertised pH neutral claim, and it's left the sealant completely intact. It still beads water really nicely. This is Wolfgang Deep Gloss 3.0 on here, and you can see on the hood that it's still beading really well. So now for the drying step. Again, my whole philosophy with this car, given its situation, is to touch it the least amount of times as possible. So when the time comes to dry it, I'm going to pull out my my Worx leaf blower here, and I'm going to try and blow as much of the water off as possible without touching the car at all, because this is, a lot of people don't realize that drying your car is a pretty high risk chance of adding swirl marks to it if you're not doing it properly. You can be doing the perfect wash process with 25 different buckets and $100 soap. If you don't dry it off properly, you could still scratch up your paint. And so for me, this car, it holds so much water as well that it's just easier to blow the water out of all the nooks and crannies, especially like the side moldings, the turn signals and the rear tail lights, and then all the vents. They all like to hold so much water, and so blowing them out, it works better. And then, like I said, it also really helps with the fact that I'm not touching the car from this point on. On a regular car, again, this is a special case. So on a normal car, I might still blow water out of the cracks first, but then I'm going to come up with a spray wax or a drying aid of some sort with a nice soft microfiber towel, and I'll dry it off that way, just because then you're adding a little bit of protection back on the paint. It helps with any kind of water streaking or anything like that, and it's just really, I think it leaves a better finish to do something that way. But again, in this car, I would just rather not touch it, and if it means that my paint is going to look 2% more dull after the wash than if I would have put a spray wax on there, it's worth it to me. I'm not going to take that extra step with a spray wax and have to rub down the entire car by hand. So after I'm done blowing it dry with the leaf blower, if you try and get 100% of the water off your car with just compressed air like that, you could be at it for 2 days. Even with a good sealant like this car has, where the water beads up nicely and it's not a problem trying to blow it off, there's always going to be some water left over just standing here or there, just because of the different directions you're blowing, and it's just kind of the nature of the beast. And so what I'll do is I'll come back over the car with, this is a Rag Company Creature Edgeless, I believe, towel. And it's super soft and fluffy, and it actually does a pretty good job of absorbing water as well. And I'll just lightly pat down any marks or any areas that I see with water on them. I want to try and avoid rubbing or wiping as much as possible, and I just want to try and pull that water up rather than wipe it off, basically. Next up, I want to try and clean up the door jambs, mostly just to get the water out of them. They stay fairly clean, especially on a car like this. But I want to get any water that's been hiding in there out, because if you leave it in there, as soon as you drive away, it's going to run out from the bottom of the door and leave streaks and watermarks all down your rockers and possibly up onto your fender. So I like to just give them a quick wipe down. This is a different towel now that I'm using. And I'm actually using my pre-rinse spray bottle of Optimum No Rinse, just because it adds a little bit of lubrication, leaves a tiny bit of polymers behind, but also my main reason is because I find it really helps with streaking water and leaving watermarks. Anything that's left over after you've used ONR like that usually tends to evaporate on its own, and it leaves a really nice streak-free finish. Then I'm going to go ahead and clean up inside the gas cap area here too. This is all stuff that if you stay on top of it, you should only have to clean it once when you first get the vehicle. And as long as you stay up on top of it every time you wash the car, it's never going to need more than a real quick little wipe down with something like this with Optimum No Rinse, that you don't need much cleaning power. Then I'm going to come around and do the passenger door jamb. Same kind of idea. I'm just giving it a couple spritzes with the ONR, wiping it down, trying to wring out water out of the towel. And this is all that I ever really need to do for door jambs and stuff like that. Once they're clean, if you do this regularly, they'll stay clean. and they'll stay freshly detailed looking without having to put a lot of work in. So now comes the toughest part of washing this car. This is the toughest task every time, is trying to get this cover off of the engine bay with the water on it out of the engine bay without just dumping the water everywhere and making it a complete waste of time. In this case, actually, I think I did a pretty good job. I got lucky with it. Normally I'll get it almost out and then I'll just kind of slip and just dump it all over the fender or all over the engine, but this time it went okay. Then I'm going to open up the trunk and just kind of wipe down the insides of the trunk here. These like to stay wet too as well. And the top of the taillights is another area that likes to hold a lot of water there. And for the few seconds that it takes to do this, it's worth it, because then you avoid having water running down the whole rear end of your car, all over your bumper, and just leaving water marks all over everything. And now I'm going to come in under the hood or the frunk or whatever you want to call it, and I'm just going to, again, just dry it out. I've got O&R that I'm spraying onto this plastic as well, and that's the great thing about Optimum No Rinse, is that if you're using it as a drying aid like this, first of all, you can see how well it absorbs water. This is about as cheap of a microfiber towel as you can get, and it's doing a great job of pulling up all of that pooled water off of this plastic trim piece. But the other great thing is that it's safe on all surfaces, so you'll see that I'll go through the rest of the frunk area and I'll wipe down the amp for the stereo, the plastics, the fuse box, the painted surfaces, the strut bar, all of that stuff. It's totally safe on, and it just leaves a nice, clean satin finish on everything with no watermarks. And again, just like the interior of the car, this under the frunk here it's sealed from the elements, and so it never really gets dirty in there. The only thing I ever really have to clean up is just a light layer of dust, and so I'll do this every few washes of just coming in there with a little bit of O&R on a towel and just wiping down the amp and the plastics in there, and that's all that's really needed. So then I'm just going to come into the engine bay, and any water that may have made it past my little cover that I've got on there, or that I've dripped out when I pulled it out, I'm just going to grab that. There's just a couple drops here and there on the strut bar, the intake manifold, and this kind of the top part of the rear firewall likes to hold some water on top of there as well. And one of the final steps that I'll do is I'll dry off the wheels. And all I'm using in here this is Meguiar's Express spray wax. I just have it in a different bottle. And I'll do 1 or 2 squirts on a wheel just before I start drying it off. And again, it's a drying aid, a lot like how I'm using Optimum No Rinse. It just does a better job of picking up the water and giving you a streak-free finish. In this case, yeah, it might leave a little bit of protection and shine behind, but because it's on a wheel that gets so hot, I mean, as soon as you drive the car, it's going to burn off anyways. So this is certainly not a replacement for a wheel coating or something like that. That's a more permanent source of protection. This is just mainly just to get a nice streak-free finish. And you'll see I come around and do the same thing on this wheel as well. It helps you to get the water out of all the different nooks and crannies of the wheel a little bit easier. Blowing it dry obviously helped that we did that first step, but now anything that's remaining, it just makes it a little bit easier to pull it up when you have a little bit of spray wax on your towel or on the wheel. And I'll do the same on the exhaust as well. Again, this is not really to add any protection. This is more just because this is a polished exhaust, and every little watermark or streak mark is going to show up. And so it's easier to get rid of those if you have a little spray wax on there. Another cool little trick is, once again, Optimum No Rinse. It makes a great little window cleaner if you're just trying to get rid of water spots or streaks. And now my final step, just to finish everything off, is to dress the tires. I clean them really well with the brush and the super degreaser first. So that gives me a nice clean surface for my dressing to bond to. And my product of choice here is Poorboy's Bold and Bright Tire Gel. It goes on nice and thick, and it's a water-based product, so it doesn't last forever, but it's also really easy to clean off if you need to. So that's how I wash the MR2. I can usually get it done in around an hour inside and out. It took me a little bit longer just because I was trying to plan out the video and stuff here. So I didn't pull the car out of the garage at the end of this video to just show you the final product. I did later on. I took it out for a few pictures just because it's getting to be the end of the season. And I always, for some reason, I always try to stockpile pictures of my vehicles just for social media and just for, you know, a computer background or something like that. It's hard up here in Canada and we have to put them away for 5 or 6 months sometimes. So I'll throw those pictures up, or at least a couple of them, so you can see what it looked like. So hopefully, I don't know if you enjoyed this video or not. This was kind of a new idea that I had of doing sort of POV detailing videos. I get that this style of video won't be for everybody, but if you did enjoy it, let me know and I'll try and do more of them. If you liked it, hit the like button. If you're into the whole channel, then go ahead and hit the subscribe button. You can keep up to date with the stuff that I got going on. But that's going to do it for this one, guys. I hope you have a good one, and I'll see you on the next one.